guys. So let me just show a couple of other, yeah, okay, yeah, and maybe just a little bit of, yeah, math, call it, or investment of what we take. So if anybody happened to buy NVIDIA stock, a couple of years ago, good move, because you need these massive GPU compute farms, GPU, G standing for graphics processing unit farms, in order to do the parallel processing associated with the training of this. And I think what's really cool, however, here, let me skip past this a little bit, do I care about this? Okay, yeah, here, let me just touch a little bit about this kind of thing, just to highlight some of the different performance that we've had. So there are some of these different data sets out there that we can do evaluations on. So NYU, New York University released some stuff around recognizing general purpose audio in an urban environment. And so, can you say this is a park, or you're in a subway, or this kind of stuff, right? So, and these are, but the volume of this is, these are 8,000 data points. Again, remember the benchmark that really moved the needle forward on image recognition was millions, right? So thousands, you're not really getting there, the scale that we need in order to do that. And so, what this is showing is that, like, listen, if we take an example of what, so when we label an image, right, we say the cat is in there. Right, and then the algorithm guesses where the cat is in there. And it's the same kind of thing with audio. We say, hey, when this big audio, or this 4-second audio chunk, between seconds 1.8 and 2.3, the footsteps are in there, right? So within a fairly well-labeled data set for, in thousands, you're talking about something like, state-of-the-art a couple of years ago was 74%. Human perception is normally viewed as about 93%. So again, by applying some of these different approaches, which I won't go into if anybody cares, now we're able to get, and we were one of the, there's an open competition that was held last year. I don't remember if this is last year or this year, is we're able to get up to about 90% accuracy, again, for general purpose sounds around 8,000 data points, which is pretty good, right? And so you can go and listen to these things, but they're not, some of them are kind of similar, but you're not really going to exchange, a beach for a bus, right? So for the things that are, this is not, it's challenging, but it's not really production grade challenging kind of thing. And this is where we need, a lot more data to make this possible. Yeah, there's a lot more, again, this is the kind of stuff where if anybody's interested to talk to me offline, I can share a little bit more about the performance data that we see. But again, we start to see, where we are at, which is great in some cases, but which is not great, not fantastic in others, right? Our state-of-the-art performance for things like, we're talking about the autonomous driving sort of scenarios, right? Can we distinguish between different on-road audio events, whether it's a siren or whether it's a car coming up, and we're a little bit better than a coin flip. And again, when I think we're pretty good compared, if you look at our capabilities with regard to the state-of-the-art. So we've got a long way to go there. But let me give you an example of something that was really amazing. For example, with using this type of techniques to detect the performance of a diesel injector, a faulty diesel injector. So this is our lab over in Stuttgart. So a high-performance anechoic chamber. So basically a super soundproof room where we did a bunch of tests on good and faulty engines. And basically, you can do almost, very, very, very good performance, right? So you're talking around that 90% performance. So that gives me hope that now, this is a mini industrial machine, right? A diesel injector is a pretty high performance, performance part. So we're talking about, almost 100% or 90% plus in different things again. And then maybe one or two final examples is just looking at, again, those physical phenomena around water and water leak detection. So this is something that both affects in our own consumer world. My basement unfortunately floods all the time in Pittsburgh. That's great, but at least I would like to know when that's happening. But then also certainly in industrial applications as well. So not just airflow, but water flow or hydraulic flow. And is there a way that we can use our domain knowledge around this to identify the states of what's happening, right? And so we look at we look at the physics of what's going on here, and understand, hey, what happens? Let me see if this is a better example of things, right? So we're able to then classify to say, well, listen, are events happening out of sequence? And if we can identify those individual events unto themselves, and recognizing when water should be flowing in a particular way, then we can also classify when we have leak detection, not by saying, hey, there's a puddle on the floor, but by listening perhaps upstream in a pipe, which then we can be able to take action a little bit earlier and recognize what's going on to perhaps shut it off at an earlier stage. And this, the reason I want to show this example is because, yeah, this is again the reference to good job buying NVIDIA stock, is because these things, each of these cards, I'm going to say it's about $1,000, right? So you're talking about, you know, $5,000, $10,000 mini servers in order to do to collect and analyze and to create these training models. But then you can, if it takes some engineering, if you will, but then you can deploy this on something like as cheap as a Raspberry Pi, which is, I mean, we even did it on something called a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is $7, right? You know, so if you do this thing correctly, you have all of this intelligence that you don't have to have super heavyweight compute. You can build it into prototypes, and I apologize, I wanted to bring one with me, that then you can build and deploy for, you know, a couple of dollars. And this is the thing that what we want to do also, again, is to look not just on the data set side of things, but also on the prototype and experimentation part. So this is, for me, the sales pitch isn't, well, like, hey, I don't want to sell you something. It's a lot of times for us, it's like, hey, who wants to try this out with us, right? So we've shown for something like, you know, water or airflow, for vibration, for even that, what I mentioned earlier about the 3D printing thing is called acoustic emission, broad spectrum acoustic emission. So we've looked at a couple of different domains, different applications, showed how this is possible, and we'd like to try to work together with some folks and see what we some brave folks, if you will, to see how we might be able to use some of this technology for other areas. Something, I just want to show this in practice, coming back a little bit, moving off the industrial applications, but show a little bit about how, from a user perspective, how this can, you know, how you or I would benefit from such a thing. Yeah. So this is, again, I mentioned that Bosch makes video cameras. Video cameras. You know, this is our old office, the observatory ping pong table, right? So you see in this area, hey, somebody's using, this is the kitchen, they're using the coffee maker, you know, and then, you know, somebody's going in and out of the door, or the front door, and in the lab, somebody's drilling, right? And why is the door opening? Why is somebody rustling around in the lab? Why are you doing that? And in that drill example, they were not in the frame, right? So you can also bring up, you know, the audio has a wider, potentially wider field of view than video does. So again, looking at different applications that are complementary to video. I think this is the last one I wanted to show. Okay, good job. So this is I mentioned that we have a pretty close partnership with Carnegie Mellon. And so one of the really great things, the leadership at CMU, the Dean of the College of Engineering, is a civil engineer by training. And so he's given us a lot of access to the campus, or enabled a lot of access to the campus. And specifically, what is really gratifying, I think, is working together with the facility management team at CMU. So they've got all these super old school, you know, machine rooms. The campus was founded the school was founded in 1900. You know, it's basically steam power, steam heat throughout campus, and so you have all these old school machine rooms all over the place. So I just want to show you, well, maybe a sort of a final video about working
Just
together.
as humans, machinery also speaks their languages. No matter if it is rotating gear, or a rolling car engine, or even a household washing machine, they all generate a distinct audio signature. An experienced technician can easily identify unique acoustic signatures associated with certain type of malfunctions. But he can't sit with the machine 24/7. SoundC is just a tiny embedded device. You can plug in any outlet and mount it close to the machine you want to monitor. It will keep a close eye on the state of the machine all the time. By listening and analyzing the sound input from the embedded high-quality microphone, SoundC can tell you whether there's anything wrong with the machine through web alert, just as if an experienced technician. SoundC has already been deployed in several critical machine rooms on campus and has been tied to the Bosch Smart Campus application. The FMS department would be notified whenever there's any central air conditioning fan goes down or act out of pattern.
Okay. Well, there's more video there, but it doesn't seem to... Nope. Okay. Yeah. So, and the deployment with Carnegie Mellon, again, a good. It's really in a good environment because it's it's a live. Yeah, I mean it's production. It's life. I mean there's 15,000 people that live, work, and play on CMU campus every day. And when they suffer a water line break, especially during the winter time, they're talking millions of dollars of lost productivity, heating, cooling, etc. So I mean, there's decent real money going on here, and so we're in a pilot phase where we're deploying in about 100 different machine rooms with tons of different kinds of machines on campus. So that's another example is corporate research, one of the ways that we want to prototype and validate our results. So yeah, I just want to maybe to kind of close on this is so actually on time for something for once. And just kind of highlight a couple of these different applications that we did, touch on some of the technology, the opportunity to work together with, whether it's small and medium businesses or startups or academics or, people want to prototype with it. But we see a big opportunity here. Certainly, again, in the question was posed earlier, whether it's in advanced manufacturing, Industry 4.0, but and touched a little bit on different parts of the of our existing business sectors as well. So it's a really cool opportunity, and also with just to reemphasize too is this is work that's led, of course, Bosch being a global organization, but this is work that's led out of our team right down the street in Pittsburgh. So I think these are the kind of developments that we see, homegrown, as I mentioned, Rust Belt United, whether it's Buffalo or Detroit or Pittsburgh. I don't know if anybody actually likes those Cleveland guys, so whatever, we'll leave them out of the equation. But these are the kind of investments that we're making in our own backyard that I think that we see hopefully will benefit all of our businesses going forward. So I think with that, I'll wrap up and say thank you for your for the attention, and I think we have time for some questions.
Hi, this is Anil Sane. I have a question. Are you restricting your scope to just the audible frequencies or beyond?
No, excellent question. No. So it's definitely also that, especially around, I gave the example of the over 3D printing. Yeah, it's ultrasonic, specifically, for example, ultrasonic, as well as low frequency as well. So there's a lot of data out there, especially around with industrial machines, that is outside of the audible spectrum. And what's also interesting too is we kind of came upon this, and this was several years ago around a different project we were doing around localization using ultrasonics, is the microphones that are in each of our phones also hear well beyond the range of human hearing. So even if you wanted to do sort of quick and dirty pilot applications for collecting data, the typical attenuation for these things, it gets better and worse depending on the generation. But human hearing is about up to 18, 19 kilohertz. Babies or cats can hear a little bit, whatever, higher, but it doesn't matter. Is these things can hear it to about 22, 23 kilohertz. So you've got bandwidth out there where you don't even need super high performance microphones. You can just take your phone, lay it somewhere, and collect data quickly and easily that way.
Do you have any industrial IoT use cases? Are you working on any predictive analytics using the audio data?
Yeah, I mean, so I tried to highlight some of the ones we mentioned here. So, for example, you saw what in that video with CMU or on the machine room. So some of those things are whether it's heat exchangers, some of the steam generators that they have as well. So those are specific machines that we're instrumenting and collecting, and we have a couple of cool examples with them where we've been able to predict the failures. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. we would have been able to predict the failures. But the algorithm that we did correctly identified when they were failures. So these are the type of, for specific industrial machines, we are actually looking at, we have experimental results that show that this kind of stuff works. And also maybe one final thing too is, this was, I should have mentioned this earlier too, is you mentioned around the audio is something that we touched on in the description for this talk, is also around vibration analysis too, right? So there's, what is audio besides, to some degree, vibration? And so there's also an opportunity for placing, you can use similar algorithms, again, where this is a little bit more experimental at this point. But there's other technologies that Bosch has for doing these type of things. But for this particular pipeline where we're looking to see if we can use those similar technologies, where if you physically couple it to a machine, so you're not just listening to it, but you're also understanding the physical vibrations of that as well. So that's something to complement similar analysis.
Thanks, Chris.
Is the, I don't know, is it on? Yeah.
Hello, thank you for your event today. Kevin Kerwin, Arc Engineering. SoundC looks like a product to me. It's in its infancy, but if I'm correct, you're taking...
I gotta have you talk to my boss. Thank you.
Yeah, it does though. I mean, you got a Raspberry Pi out there. I get it. Basically, I want to confirm you're taking sound, you're turning it through a spectrograph into images, feeding it through a convolutional neural network to learn what sounds sound like. Your thing out in the campus there, where your Raspberry Pi and the cell phone's telling the guy what's wrong. How do you collect the data to feed to your GPU crunchers? Does the Raspberry Pi collect the data to start with and then feed it through a network, a mesh network, to a cloud, and then goes to the GPU, or?
Yeah.
And then the GPU learns and feeds back the learned network?
That's a good question. So this actually also spun out of a project that we had been doing with Carnegie Mellon for almost 10 years called Smart Campus, where we had instrumented the campus with a whole bunch of different sensors. And there's an entire... it was actually also supported by the Department of Energy. Our original hypothesis is that we were going to collect this data and create actionable stuff around energy saving. Turn off the lights, nobody's in the room, turn off the HVAC. So we had this data collection pipeline. Also to be totally clear, like not creepy, like super big signs. This is what we're doing with the data, all this kind of stuff. Like what do you call it? Campus review boards, all this kind of stuff. So this is not panopticon stuff. Yeah, so we had a lot of that platform and that pipeline for collecting and storing and analyzing that data built. We thought we were going to do something totally different with it, and then we were able to kind of leverage that to build this.
Gotcha. Because that's a problem I see, is getting the data. Collecting
exactly.
the data. I can do everything else if I got the data.
Yeah. And also, not just getting the data, but also having the domain experts. I cannot emphasize enough the debt that we owe to the facility management people with trusting us to put our random stuff there, and then B, helping us make sense of that, right? It's not, if it's just an audio stream, right? They're the ones that then help us go out and label and say, oh, this is what this happens. Let me go back and look at my log on when something failed or something worked, and then over time, right? It would be nothing without those team members helping us make sense of that. So I cannot emphasize enough, again, and not just about dumb streams of audio. Again, it boggles my mind. There are hundreds, not at the moment because the Uber cars are still off the road, but the Ford and Argo are driving around hundreds of cars in Pittsburgh, and I really want to understand how these guys are making sense of their data, because this is the way that we've got to do it.
Yeah, because as machine makers and stuff like that, it'd be really cool if you could, what your machine sounds like when it's running right. And if you had a sensor built into it, monitoring that machine, and then you could tell somebody, hey, this thing's starting to run wrong because this axis is not sounding right.
Absolutely.
Anyways, thank you.
And also just to complement too is there's other data sources that you can use. The real power of this, I think, will be to create a comprehensive picture of one of those complicated machines. There's another, kind of use another little buzzword, but it's a digital twin of that, and that digital twin is not made up of just one sensing modality. You could imagine something too around, hey, what is the current draw, or the power it's using, or the heat, or all this kind of stuff. And so not just, you kind of have all this different stuff feeding into that digital twin model, and then you can also look at all those different data points and try to understand, hey, this is not, it's operating out of spec from this dimension, and now I can better understand why this is failing. And this is also work that Bosch is doing together as well.
You talked a lot about single sounds. I know augury, for instance, mounts directly to a machine, so it can focus on just one machine at a time. How easily does the system get overwhelmed if there's lots of noise, if there's multiple machines running, if there's 5 people using a drill and there's 2 3D printers running?
Yep, that's an excellent question. I think that this is also, we're specifically looking at disambiguating some of that stuff. Now, some of it too, you can perform techniques like intensity, right? So if you know where the microphone is placed, and you hear a couple of different things, you can disambiguate to say, hey, this sound is more intensive, and I think it's over here. Yeah, but that's really a huge challenge. And that's also why, for example, in while we think some of the stuff around those car, the things around understanding the performance on a vehicle, because there's just so much stuff happening, right? So, and they're layering on top of each other. And this is also for this, what's interesting though, too, is if you look at, and this is part of, it goes to this explainable AI thing, right? The challenge in this case was to recognize scenes. So in some of the classifiers, it learns what a beach is, but it's not necessarily because it knows what seagulls are and what children playing in the sand are. It just sort of learns collectively what a beach is. And so in that case, you're actually not disambiguating the sounds. You're learning what beach sounds are. Which, and this is still really at that intersection of when is it good to collect stuff? When do you want to disambiguate? When do you want to collect? All this kind of stuff. So, but that's definitely a frontier that we have to push on. The thing that, and again, thank you for the compliment that it kind of looks like a product. We really want to validate that we think that we can get to a production level, a reliable grade. Because if you think about it, if we're sending false positives out to send a tech out to something, that's potentially worse than nothing at all, right? So the cost incurred with that. So our focus right now, not that is not certainly a critical element to getting us to work, but is to make sure that we can, at least in an ideal case, understand, use this technology to understand what's going on in an environment or at a machine.
I think the biggest takeaway from this event was what you just said a few minutes ago, that big data is worthless unless you can make meaningful analysis out of it on actual next steps. If it can't be translated in that way, it's just nothing but noise. And AI has come a long way in resolving that issue.
Yeah, and that's also something, actually we were talking a little bit before, specifically about creating around labeling this data is another activity that we're working on at our lab together with some of our autonomous driving folks as well. So there's a couple of different startups that are working in this area. So one, kind of the most famous example is probably Mighty AI. There's another partnership with another one called Crowdflower, working with Microsoft, just as a couple of by way of examples about how can we combine human and machine intelligence in order to make sense of this data. And it leverages a technique called crowdsourcing. So there are these large, I mean, we all know about stuff like we talk about the gig economy, right? And a lot of times it means like, your Uber or Lyft driver, they do their job, one job, or maybe that's their primary source of income. They flip the thing on, they flip it off, right? It's their gig job or something like TaskRabbit. But there's a whole also set of opportunities or workers working in the information gig economy. Have you ever heard of something called, the most popular platform in the US is probably Amazon Mechanical Turk, where there's 500,000 people at least that work on Amazon Mechanical Turk around doing things like organizing photos or writing a term paper thesis or like information tasks where you don't have to be physically present. And there's the opportunity to also involve these folks in doing something around labeling data. Here's an here's an audio clip. What does it sound like? From 4 seconds to 5 seconds, it's footsteps or something like this. So this is really critical to building up these high quality labeled data sets. There is no ImageNet for sound, and the way they built ImageNet was using that kind of technique. That's exactly correct. We want to build ImageNet, or AudioNet for sound, or whatever.
Hello, Kristen O'Neill with Automation Alley. Piggybacking off of Daniel's question from Universal Robots, I'm wondering about the percentage of variability in an audio file versus an image file. Have you found any correlations where audio files have more or less variability due to any kind of background noise or inconsistencies in those?
I mean, I guess that goes back to the last question, right? You know, not to use the old garbage in, garbage out cliche, but you know, one of the things we want to build is around these high quality, you know, data sets, because we want to push on the limits of the technology to know, let's say in the ideal sense, let's say if everything's perfect, no background noise, we know exactly what it is, you know, this kind of thing. Let's feed it perfect data and then see what the capabilities of this are, and then slowly introduce, you know, realistic scenarios in that. And you know, then that's also the case where, you know, my team does not work on image recognition, but I also, you know the way that how hard our colleagues, you know, around the world work on making these algorithms robust. Image and video recognition algorithms robust enough to be deployed on autonomous vehicles, right? I mean, so if you're talking about recognizing, you know, a person or a guardrail or a laminate, you know, there's snow, there's weather, there's that noise in that. And so I think we will learn from the techniques that they've deployed to make these things robust. Also, a little bit of a note about that too is maybe somebody happened to see. So we just 2 weeks ago, when we announced the launch of the Bosch Center for AI in Pittsburgh, again in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University, we did this specifically. We're sponsoring the research of Professor Zico Coulter at CMU, and he's also joined Bosch as our chief scientist for AI here in North America, and his expertise is exactly in that, about making these algorithms robust so when you give it potentially crummy or noisy input, then you know what you're better able to make sense of those types of things. I'm sorry, did that answer your question? Good. All right, everybody's an AI expert. I wasn't sure, are they able to get questions off the stream or something? Or no? Nothing yet? Okay. Cool. All right, well, that's all I've got, I guess. I'm not sure if our Automation Alley hosts want to mention anything else, but thank you, everybody, for joining. I'll be here for a bit, and appreciate taking time.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Chris. That was an excellent presentation, and definitely gave a lot of new information and a lot of new ideas. So hopefully we can mull over that. We have these events every Wednesday morning. We would love to see all of you here every Wednesday morning. We also do live stream them. So if there's ever a morning that you don't feel like getting out of your pajamas, you can always feel free to watch on your PC as well. So if you have any questions about Automation Alley, anything like that, feel free to grab me or any other member. And then I know Chris is kind enough to stick around for questions after the fact. So grab a cup of coffee for the road, grab some breakfast, and thank you again for coming.